The little girl sat quietly on the wooden stool by the sidewalk. Her small hands, though weak, held a paintbrush with care. Each stroke she made on the rough sheet of paper was slow but filled with feeling. People walking past barely noticed her at first. Some were in a hurry, some too busy on their phones, and some simply glanced at her before moving on. But the girl didn't let that bother her. She kept painting, because she knew this was the only way she could help herself. She was not like other children her age who played freely in the park or ran around laughing. Her life was very different. She had been sick for a long time, and the doctors had told her family that she needed regular treatment if she wanted to get better. That treatment cost a lot of money, far more than her family could afford. Her parents had already tried everything, borrowing from friends, working extra hours, cutting down on their needs, but it still wasn't enough. One evening, as she lay in bed, she heard her parents whispering. They thought she was asleep, but she could hear their soft voices filled with worry. They spoke about bills, about medicines, about how difficult things had become. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she realized how much pain they were going through because of her illness. It was then that she decided she would not just wait and watch. She had to do something, anything, to help. Painting was the one thing she loved and the one thing she was good at. She had always enjoyed filling her pages with colors, even when she was little. Her drawings might not have been perfect, but they carried her feelings, her dreams, her fears, her hopes. With this simple gift in her hands, she decided to try. She told her mother that she wanted to sell her paintings. At first, her mother was shocked and tried to say no. But the girl looked at her with eyes full of determination, and finally she agreed. The next day, with a small table borrowed from a neighbor and a few sheets of paper, she set up a tiny stand at the corner of the street. She placed her paintings carefully on the table, hoping that someone, anyone, would stop to look. The morning was quiet. For hours, not a single person seemed interested. She began to feel a little discouraged, but she reminded herself why she was there. She whispered softly, "This is for my treatment. This is for my life." Finally, a kind old lady noticed her and stopped. She bent down, picked up a small painting of a tree, and asked gently, "Did you paint this yourself?" The girl nodded. The old lady smiled warmly and placed some coins on the table before walking away with the painting. That simple act lit a small spark of hope inside the girl's heart. She thought, maybe, just maybe, this could work. Day after day, she returned to that same spot. Some days, she earned a little. Some days, almost nothing. There were moments when people brushed past her, not even glancing at her artwork, and she felt invisible. Yet, she never gave up. Even when her body felt tired, she sat with her brushes and colors, pouring her emotions into every piece she created. She painted what she saw around her, the sun setting behind the rooftops, a little bird perched on a wire, children playing in the distance. She also painted what she dreamed of: a garden full of flowers, a house filled with laughter, a future where she could be healthy and free. Every painting told a part of her story, even if she didn't say a word. As time went on, a few neighbors began to notice her courage. Some stopped by to buy a painting, not because they needed it, but because they wanted to encourage her. They would smile and tell her, "You're very talented, don't stop painting." Those words gave her strength. She held on to them tightly, especially on the days when no one bought anything and she went home with an empty hand. But no matter what, she continued. Every morning, as she prepared her small stand, she thought of her parents. She thought of how tired they looked, how heavy their hearts must be. She wanted to take away their worry, even just a little. In her young heart, she carried a big dream, that one day she could hand them enough money for her treatment and see their faces light up with relief. The world around her seemed so big, and she felt so small. Yet, she believed that her little paintings, her little effort, could make a difference. She had no idea what the future would bring. She didn't know if her stand would ever truly help cover her medical costs. All she knew was that she had to try. And so, on that small street corner, in the midst of rushing people and busy lives, the young girl sat with her brushes, her colors, and her quiet courage. She wasn't just selling paintings. She was selling hope for her treatment, hope for her family, hope for a future that she refused to give up on. The little girl's routine slowly became part of the street. Each morning, she would set up her small table with paintings stacked neatly, her brushes tucked in a jar, and a box to collect whatever money she could earn. The neighbors began to notice her more often now. Some would wave as they passed, and a few even stopped to ask about her paintings. Although most people still hurried by without a glance, she had grown used to it. What mattered was that she was doing something, no matter how small, for her own future. Even though her body was weak, she tried not to let it show. Her illness often left her tired, sometimes even dizzy, but she fought through it with a quiet strength. Sitting on the corner wasn't easy. The sun was harsh during the day, and in the evenings the breeze would sometimes grow cold. Yet she remained there, painting picture after picture, filling the papers with colors that spoke louder than her words ever could. Some of her paintings were simple, just flowers, clouds, or trees. Others carried deeper meaning. One picture showed a girl reaching for the stars. Another showed a family holding hands under a big bright sun. People who stopped to look often felt touched, though they didn't always say why. It was as if her brush captured emotions that others could feel but not explain. Slowly, her courage started inspiring those around her. One shopkeeper nearby, who sold fruits, sometimes gave her a small apple or banana at the end of the day. Another neighbor, who ran a tea stall, offered her a warm cup without charging. They admired her spirit, a little girl who refused to give up, even when life seemed unfair. Despite these small kindnesses, the money she made was very little compared to what she needed. Most days she returned home with just a few coins or small notes. At night, when she lay in bed, she would count the money carefully, stacking it in a small box she kept hidden under her pillow. She knew it wasn't enough, but she also knew that every coin carried her effort, her determination. She reminded herself that it wasn't just about the money. It was about proving to herself and her parents that she would not give up. One rainy afternoon, when the clouds grew heavy and most people stayed indoors, she still set up her stand. Her mother begged her not to go out, but she insisted. She placed a sheet of plastic over her table and sat quietly under a broken umbrella. Hardly anyone passed by that day, and her hands were cold from the rain, but she continued painting. She painted a rainbow breaking through dark clouds, as if her brush wanted to tell her own story, that light always follows darkness. When a passerby saw her sitting there, drenched but still working, he stopped and bought one of her paintings without even bargaining. He slipped a note that was larger than usual into her box and told her softly, "Don't give up, little one." That evening, she walked home wet but smiling, her heart full of warmth that no storm could take away. Her parents often tried to convince her to rest, but she always shook her head and said she wanted to help. It wasn't only about the treatment anymore. It was about her dignity, her strength, and her wish to stand up for herself. She wanted to show that even though she was just a child, she had a spirit stronger than her sickness. Sometimes children her age would gather around her stand, watching curiously as she painted. A few of them even tried to copy her drawings with their own pencils. She would smile and encourage them, happy to share her love for colors. Those small moments gave her joy. Even though her own body was fighting a silent battle, she could still inspire others, even if it was just through a simple drawing of a tree or a butterfly dot at night. When the world grew quiet, she often thought about her dreams. She imagined herself growing older, healthier, painting on big canvases in a bright studio filled with sunlight. She dreamed of an art exhibition where people would gather to see her work. She wanted her parents to stand proudly beside her, no longer worried about bills or medicines. These dreams gave her strength to wake up every morning and set up her little table again. Her journey was not easy. And she knew it. The money was slow, the sickness was hard, and many people still ignored her. But deep down, she believed that every effort she made would one day lead to something bigger. She did not know how or when, but she trusted that life would reward her courage, and so, the little girl continued her fight, not in hospitals alone, not only through medicine, but also through her paintbrush. With each stroke, she told the world she was still here, still hopeful, still determined. She had no idea that her courage would soon catch the attention of someone whose presence would change her life forever. The afternoon sun was warm that day, casting long shadows on the street where the little girl sat with her table of paintings. It seemed like any other day. People walked past in a hurry, cars rushed by, and the girl sat quietly, her hands busy moving the brush over paper. She was painting a picture of a small bird flying free against a bright sky, something she often dreamed of when she thought about life without sickness. She was so focused on her work that she didn't notice the sleek black car slowing down on the other side of the road. The car was unlike anything usually seen in that neighborhood. Its polished surface gleamed, and its quiet engine gave away its luxury. For a moment, some of the people nearby turned to look, wondering who could be inside. The car came to a gentle stop, and the door opened. Out stepped a tall man dressed neatly in an expensive suit. His shoes shined, his watch sparkled in the sun, and everything about him showed he was not an ordinary passerby. Some people recognized him at once. He was one of the richest men in the city, a billionaire whose name often appeared in newspapers and magazines. People usually saw him surrounded by cameras, important meetings, or fancy parties, not walking casually on a busy street. The girl didn't look up at first. She was still finishing the wing of the bird she was painting. The man walked closer and stopped in front of her small table. For a moment, he just stood there silently, his eyes moving over the little paintings spread neatly across the worn-out wooden surface. Each painting was simple, yet full of heart. Sunsets, trees, children, and houses, all drawn with colors that carried more feeling than skill. Finally, the girl lifted her eyes. She was surprised to see someone like him standing there. He bent down slightly and picked up one of her drawings, a picture of a family holding hands under a rainbow. He studied it carefully, almost as if he were trying to see beyond the colors. "Did you paint this?" he asked in a gentle voice. The girl nodded shyly. She was not used to people like him stopping by. Her voice was soft when she replied, "Yes, I paint all of them." He placed the painting back on the table and asked, "Why are you selling them here?" For a moment, she hesitated. She had explained her story before to a few people, but never to someone like him. Still, she spoke honestly. She told him she was sick, that she needed treatment, and that her parents couldn't afford it. She said painting was something she loved and the only way she could think of to help. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of her struggle. The man listened quietly. His expression changed as he heard her story. He had seen poverty before, he had donated to charities, but standing here in front of this little girl with her fragile hands and hopeful eyes made everything feel different. This was not a story on the news, not a number in a report. This was real, raw, and right in front of him. People nearby began to notice the unusual scene. A billionaire standing by a child's small table of paintings was not something they saw every day. Some paused to watch, curious about what was happening. The street seemed to grow quieter as if waiting for his next move. The girl, however, looked at him with no expectation. She wasn't thinking about who he was or how much money he had. To her, he was just another person who had stopped to look at her work. Deep down, she hoped he might buy a small painting, maybe enough for her to add a few coins to her box, but the man was thinking about much more than buying a single picture. In her courage, he saw something that touched his heart. He thought about how many children her age were carefree, playing and laughing, while this little one was sitting here fighting for her life. He thought about how unfair it was that someone so young had to carry such a heavy burden, he picked up another painting, this time of the bird flying free. "This one," he said softly. "It looks like it wants to escape." The girl smiled faintly. "It does," she whispered. "I always paint birds because they can go anywhere without being stopped. I want to be like them one day." Her words struck him deeply. He held the painting in his hands for a long moment, then looked at the rest of the artwork spread across the table. Something inside him shifted. He realized that he wasn't just looking at simple drawings. He was looking at pieces of her soul, her struggle, her hope, her fight to live. Without saying much, he nodded slowly. "You have a gift," he told her. "And you're very brave." The girl lowered her eyes, not knowing what else to say. To her, they were just words of kindness, but she had no idea that this man was about to make a decision that would change everything in her life. The man stood there for a few more moments, his eyes lingering on the small paintings laid out across the table. People walking by slowed down, curious about what was happening. A billionaire was not someone they expected to see bending over a child's street corner art stand. The air felt different, as if everyone was waiting for his next move. The girl sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes watching him carefully but without expectation. She had met many people who stopped to ask questions, some who smiled, some who bought a painting out of pity, and others who walked away after hearing her story. She thought maybe this man would be the same kind words, maybe one small purchase, and then he would leave in his expensive car. That would be enough for her. One more coin in the box, one more tiny step toward her treatment. But inside the man's heart, something was stirring. He had built a life of great wealth, surrounded by tall buildings, fast cars, and endless business meetings. He was used to making deals worth millions, but rarely did anything touch him this deeply. This girl, with her fragile hands and brave spirit, was fighting harder than most adults he knew. Her paintings were not professional, yet they carried emotions no money could buy. He felt something shift inside him, a reminder that life was not only about profit or success, but also about kindness, about humanity. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. The girl thought he was about to buy one of her pictures. She straightened a little, ready to hand over whichever painting he pointed at. But instead, he asked softly, "How many paintings do you have?" The girl blinked in surprise. "All of these," she whispered, pointing at the stack on the table and a few more tucked in a folder by her side. "I'll take them." "All," he said firmly. Her eyes widened. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she had heard him right. "All?" she asked, her voice trembling. He nodded. "Every single one." She hesitated, almost confused. People usually bought one, sometimes two, but never all. "But why?" she asked quietly. The man leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Because your paintings are more than just pictures. They carry hope, courage, and dreams. And because you deserve a chance to live those dreams." The people nearby gasped. Some even stopped walking and stood there watching, their eyes shining with curiosity and emotion. Then, without another word, the man took out a checkbook from his briefcase. He wrote something on it quickly, his pen moving with purpose. When he was done, he tore the page and handed it to her with a warm smile. The girl looked at the piece of paper, unsure of what it was. She had never held a check before. She only knew coins and small notes. "It's for your treatment," the man explained softly. "Enough to cover your medical bills and more. You don't have to worry about money anymore." For a moment, she just stared at him, her little hands shaking as she held the paper. Her heart raced, her eyes filled with tears she tried to hold back. "Is this real?" she whispered. The man nodded again, his expression kind. "Yes, it's real. You've been strong for so long. Now it's time someone else helps you." Her lips trembled as tears rolled down her cheeks. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She simply lowered her head and sobbed quietly, her small shoulders shaking. The people watching were moved beyond words. Some pulled out their phones to record the moment. Others wiped their own tears. They could not believe what they had just witnessed, a billionaire choosing compassion over everything else, changing a little girl's life in front of their eyes. The man bent down and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't give up," he told her softly. "You're going to make it. And one day, I want to see you paint on a big canvas, not just these little sheets. Promise me you'll keep painting." The girl nodded through her tears, clutching the check to her chest as if it were the most precious thing she had ever held. She couldn't find the words, but her eyes said everything: gratitude, disbelief, and hope all at once. The billionaire stood up, looked around at the small crowd, and gave a polite nod before walking back to his car. His driver opened the door, and within moments, the sleek car pulled away, leaving behind stunned silence. But the silence didn't last long. People began talking, their voices full of awe. "Did you see that?" One whispered. "He bought everything." Another added, "He paid for her treatment." "That man just saved her life." The girl sat there still trembling, holding the check, tears still streaming down her face. Her heart was beating fast, and though she was too overwhelmed to understand the full value of what she had been given, she knew one thing: her fight for life had just been given a miracle. That evening, when she walked home with her paintings gone and the check safely tucked in her pocket, her parents were speechless. Her mother covered her mouth with her hands, her father's eyes filled with tears he couldn't hide. They hugged her tightly, unable to believe that a stranger's kindness had lifted the heavy weight that had been crushing them for so long. For the first time in months, the house was filled not with worry, but with hope. And somewhere in the city, the billionaire sat in his quiet office, replaying the moment in his mind. He had signed many checks in his life, but none had ever felt as meaningful as the one he had given to that little girl. The days that followed felt like a dream for the little girl and her family. For so long, their lives had been filled with worry, sleepless nights, and endless fear about how they would pay for her treatment. But now, the heavy burden had been lifted. The check from the billionaire had not only covered her medical bills, but also given them enough to breathe again, to live without the constant shadow of debt. The girl went to the hospital for her treatment with a new sense of hope. The nurses, who had often seen her arriving quietly with tired eyes, now noticed a brighter spirit in her. She smiled more, even as she sat through painful procedures. She would often bring her sketchbook with her, filling it with little drawings while she waited. Birds, flowers, rainbows, and sometimes the image of a tall man in a suit, her way of remembering the stranger who had stepped into her life like an odd angel. Her parents watched her slowly regain strength. Day by day, her face grew less pale, her laughter returned, and her hands, once weak, began to hold her brushes with more energy. For them, nothing was more precious than seeing their daughter's health return. They often spoke about the billionaire, their voices filled with gratitude. "He didn't just give us money," her father would say softly. "He gave us our daughter's future back." Meanwhile, the story of what had happened on that street corner spread quickly. Someone had recorded the moment on their phone, and the video traveled across social media. Millions of people watched as the billionaire handed over the check, watched the girl's tears of disbelief, and felt their own hearts moved. Strangers from different parts of the world began sending messages of support, prayers, and even small donations to help the girl continue her journey. She never expected any of it. All she had wanted was to help her parents a little by selling her paintings. Yet here she was, becoming a symbol of courage and hope for countless others. People wrote comments like, "Her strength inspires me, and this proves there's still kindness in the world." The billionaire, too, saw the video. Though he was a man often used to headlines about his businesses, this was different. This time, the world wasn't talking about his wealth or his success, but about his compassion. For once, the spotlight didn't feel heavy, it felt meaningful. When asked by reporters why he had done it, he answered simply, "Because I saw a brave child fighting alone, And no child should have to fight like that without help. As weeks turned into months, the girl continued to recover. Her paintings became brighter, more colorful, full of life. She no longer painted just birds trapped in cages or rainbows over stormy skies. Now her drawings showed wide blue skies, smiling families, and children running freely in fields. Her art reflected her heart, no longer weighed down by fear but lifted by hope. One afternoon, the billionaire came to visit her again, this time at a small community event where her paintings were being displayed. With the help of neighbors and volunteers, her simple artworks had been turned into an exhibition, allowing people to see her journey through colors. The hall was filled with drawings that told her story: struggle, pain, courage, and finally joy. When she saw him walk in, her face lit up. She ran to him, healthier now, her steps quicker and stronger than before. "You came," she said with a wide smile. He smiled back and nodded. "I told you I wanted to see you paint on bigger canvases," he said warmly. "And here you are." Together they walked around the exhibition, stopping to look at each painting. People whispered around them, touched by the sight of the little girl beside the man who had changed her life. At one corner, she pointed to a painting of a bird soaring high in the sky. "This one," she said proudly, "is me now." The billionaire felt his chest tighten with emotion. He had closed many business deals in his life, but this was the first time he felt like he had truly invested in something that mattered. By the end of the event, the girl's story had touched even more lives. People bought her paintings not out of pity, but because they saw real beauty in them. Her courage had given the colors meaning. Her journey had turned into art that people wanted to carry home, hang on their walls, and remember. At home that night, the girl sat by her window, looking up at the stars. Her heart was full, not only because she was getting better, but because she had learned something important. Kindness has the power to change lives, and hope can carry you through the darkest nights. Her story was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone who had been touched by it: the neighbors who supported her, the strangers who sent messages, the people who bought her paintings, and of course, the billionaire who had shown her that miracles can come from unexpected places. She picked up her brush once again, dipping it into bright colors. On the blank paper, she painted a large canvas of a little girl standing under a wide, endless sky, holding a paintbrush in one hand and reaching toward the sun with the other. It was not just a picture. It was her life, her journey, her new beginning. And as she painted, she whispered softly to herself, "I will never stop dreaming."